Hello and welcome to the show. My guest today is an American writer who originally came to Europe when he was 2 years old. Obviously, he was too young to remember that, but it must have had some subliminal effect because he's lived in many parts of this continent over the last 4 decades now. Michael Lederer currently divides his time between Dubrovnik, where he's the director of the Shakespeare Festival there, Cadaques in northern Spain, the inspiration for his latest novel, and here in Berlin, which is his main domicile. Welcome to the show. Have I got that right? Is Berlin your main address?
Yes, absolutely.
And I know that you were brought up in California. Dubrovnik is very beautiful, I'm told. Cadaques is possibly even more beautiful, so you tell us. And so why Berlin, not known for its beauty? What's so particular about Berlin?
No, I think that as a writer and somebody coming from these beautiful places, one can get a bit lost in so many blue skies and so many rather, pleasant, uneventful days. And at the end of the day, you don't want to find yourself writing about, the flowers growing and the clouds drifting by. And so you want to be in a place that stimulates, that doesn't just relax and doesn't just please. So Berlin especially, because it was it still is, at the epicenter of so much history, so much dynamic tension. The fact that in the course of a single lifetime, an older person's life, you went from Weimar Republic to National Socialism, to a city and a country divided with a wall, to the wall collapsing. Now, for some years, Germany integrating itself into this new concept, this experiment of a united Europe. And now, of course, we're adding one more layer to the story as we see in Ukraine, sort of a reawoken tension coming. I thought when I first came here that maybe I had missed that I had gone from one sort of happy circumstance to another. Because in 1998, when I began to settle here, it was really a very pleasant and very peaceful place. And I wrote one story, Berlin-Warsaw Express, that even, maybe a little arrogantly, maybe a little naively, expressed some frustration with that.
So does history, I mean, you don't actually, what I've read of yours, I haven't read your latest book, but I know roughly what it's about, but I'll ask you in a second. But you don't write about historical novels, though, do you? But history inspires you?
Very, very much, because what I do write about, and I think most writers of fiction, because we are creating characters, we write about human nature. And that expresses itself in response to stimuli. So that's what I meant by the blue skies and, another nice sushi lunch. Not enough stimulation. Whereas if you subject your characters and yourself as a writer to the kind of stimuli that you find in a dynamic place like Berlin, I write about human nature. And so you're right, they're not historical, they're not set in other historic epics. But this is a historic time right now as well. We see that with Ukraine. That's just the starkest example. History did not stop, as some of us had mistakenly thought for a while.
Let's talk about the book, though. Cadaques is your latest book. It's a big tome. And this is a picture of life in Cadaques?
Yes, that's right. This is me sitting, I think 2 years ago, with a group of friends. And these are not characters in my book, Cadaques, the novel, but these are people who are similar in some ways to some of the characters. And this was, this was the first full-length novel that I wrote. And it's something that I personally had to get out of my system. Because as I've told you off camera, before we were shooting, I spent too many years of my life drinking and smoking marijuana, so much so that 35 years, from the age of 12 to 47, somehow sort of evaporated. You know, they went that way. They went that way. And Cadaques is a place where I used to go and live out some of that story. Now, and there are people there to this day, friends of mine, for instance, who are still in that sort of, I'll call it the cha-cha-cha mode. So I went and I was very lucky to be able to set this story about an American writer who's wrestling with some of these same issues that I've wrestled with, in the context of this extraordinary fishing village in Spain.
I should mention here, actually, I mean, it is an extraordinary fishing village because a lot of artists have lived there. I mean, I've got a list here. Picasso, Marcel Duchamp, Dali, and many others actually lived there at one time or other.
Louis Buñuel, Garcia Lorca, John Cage. It's a very long list. And what's wonderful is, of course, these people have also spent time in Paris, also spent time in New York. But the soup is a bit thinner in those big places because it's all so spread out. You get an incy-wincy little village like Cadaques, and the ratio of those great 20th century personalities to the locals was big enough so that the impact they had on the village and the impact that the village had on them. I mean, there was a reason they were drawn to this place. And so the coupling of these great creative thinkers with a very pristine local context, the fishermen, for instance, and the natural beauty of the place, the rocks that have all these extraordinary shapes that inspired Dali and Buñuel and others.
Well, let's talk about that Cadaques a bit more a little later, but let's have a look at how you live here in Berlin now. We're going to get a tour of your neighbourhood together with your wife, Katharina, but we begin with a couple of important rooms in your own home.
Uh-huh. When one writes, one sits alone, and the candle and the cigar make me feel a little less alone as I do it. All right, so I'll show you this crazy setup that we have. This we use basically for parties. I inherited this furniture. It was not my style, but it's a lot of fun. And so we get this room full of actors and writers and painters and musicians, and there are some crazy evenings spent here. So just imagine it full of smoke and laughter and shouting and excitement. This is my favorite street in Berlin. This is Bergmannstrasse in Kreuzberg. And I love it. You got lots of cafes, little antiquariats, music shops. You buy like old vinyl, bookshops. It's very multiculti, which Berlin is. And it's just a nice combination of a world capital. And at the same time, it's a little slower and easier paced. No book gets written, no play no poem without coffee. And so this is the newest member of our family. Hello. This is already enough reason to move to Berlin. It's the best ice cream on this planet and probably any planet. And we all become children again when we eat ice cream, I think. This is one of my favorite places in Berlin. And you get, just real music. It's not nothing plastic. It's from the heart, from the soul. This is the nice thing also, you run into friends. See, in Berlin you can just eat with your fingers. That's another reason for living.
No, you can't.
Cadaques is my guest Michael Lederer's latest novel, and we've got a signed copy to give away. Write to us. Our address is insight@dw.de, and the novel is set in Spain, in Cadaques, of course, but parts of it also take place here in Berlin.
Yes, very important part.
Which you're not going to reveal because people have to read the book.
That's right. But I will say one thing that touches on what we were talking about before we went to that little film clip. Because you were asking why Berlin earlier. And there's a parallel, because this book deals with a character who is trying to reinvent himself in middle age and take a different fork. And Berlin is a place which has done just that. If you look at it in the past, very few would have expected it to be the city that it is today. And so I take great comfort at a personal level working and living in the context of a city that has achieved what I have tried to achieve in my personal life.
There's another connection to Germany, and with a picture we have here, which I hope we can get a close-up of at some point, which you just brought in with us.
Yes.
You tell the story, please, of this picture.
Yes, this is my my father and his mother, his sister, and his father. And my father was born in Zagreb, then Yugoslavia, 1929. And his family was Jewish. And after the war began and the Ustashi in Yugoslavia rose to power, they were forced to flee. My grandfather was a lawyer. He was arrested and put into a camp for practicing law after it was forbidden for Jews to practice law. My grandmother, Ruja, was the first woman architect in Yugoslavia. They had a very comfortable and very happy life. And then, as it did for millions, the war disrupted them. They ran to Italy. They hid for 3 years. They worked their way down south, eventually to Naples, and they were very, very lucky because during the war, at President Roosevelt's behest, there was one single boat on which it was permitted for a group of Jewish refugees to come to America. There were 982 on that boat. Half the boat were these refugees. The other half were wounded American soldiers from Anzio and Cassino.
And they were on that one boat.
They were on that one boat, so 4 of them were Lederers. They came to the States and they were immediately dispatched to an internment camp in Oswego, New York, but a very pleasant one. I mean, it was a very nice, happy, and safe environment. And they had promised, they had all signed papers saying at the end of the war they would return to Europe. Well, the end of the war came. My grandfather gave congressional testimony in which he said, certainly we'll honor our promise to go back, but gentlemen, ladies, what are we going back to? So they asked, and they received permission by Truman. It was a decree signed by Truman. They were permitted to stay. They had to scoot into Canada, literally for an hour, turn around, and come back. And so those 982 refugees stayed, and that was 1945. And I was...
That's how you came to be born in America.
I was born 1956, yeah.
And we move on. You were born in the East Coast, but brought up, I think, in California, mostly. Am I right?
Yes.
And you sent in some wonderful photos. Perhaps yes, this is the one that I love the most, I think. This is of you as a 2-year-old. That isn't a real cigarette, is it?
It's an ivory cigarette holder that my father used for his real cigarettes.
Oh, okay.
So it looks like a little pipe sort of thing. But that was in our yard in New Haven, Connecticut.
And this is, I suppose, to the German connection, the Lederhosen, indeed.
Yes, because while my father's family, excuse me, was, as I said, from Yugoslavia and Jewish, my mother's family was German. Her parents both were born in Stettin, and German was spoken in their house as a variety of languages were spoken in my father's house. So from the beginning, I was born an American, and I felt myself American, but I always had one foot here in Europe. And that continues to this day.
And at first, a sort of conventional upbringing, but then I think things changed. I mean, I believe you went to live, presumably with your parents, into a commune in California.
No. That was not with my parents.
Oh.
That was not... My father was the last person in the world who would have done that.
Oh, I see. This was escape from parents time.
Yes. This was find a new way with a whole generation that was finding a new way at the time. That's with my brother Philip. Yeah. And
is this when the drugs and the drink took over?
No, they had already made their inroads. What happened is I was born in Princeton, where my father was getting his PhD in diplomatic history. And on my first birthday, we moved to New Haven. He became a professor at Yale. And we had a really delicious sort of 1950s style lifestyle, you know. Father with promising career, beautiful mother, nice yard and friends. And then 1965, I was 9 years old and my father accepted a professorship at Stanford. And we jumped into the car.
This is in California?
This is in Palo Alto, California. So that's when the fan hit the you-know-what. And everything changed. And not just for me, but for the country, actually. 1965 was sort of a great divide. And when we got to Palo Alto, my parents almost immediately divorced. My mother became a practicing alcoholic. The 1960s were raging around us. I mean, that was like moving the family to Poland in 1939, to go to San Francisco Bay Area, 1965. Was really going into the eye of the hurricane. And in the context of that puberty, I was 12 years old. And so in response to all of that, you know, the drugs were there and the alcohol was there. And the train left the track. The Michael train got off the track. And it took a very...
At what age were you then when you went into the commune?
So that had begun at 12, the misbehavior. And the commune happened when I was 18.
Okay.
And I kept going back and forth, New York, California. I lived in Greenwich Village, 1975. And then a girlfriend and I, we moved to this commune in the hills above Palo Alto that Joan Baez and her husband David Harris had started as the Institute for the Study of Nonviolence. And we lived in a geodesic dome. We lived in a teepee, 3 years without electricity. And I loved it. Daddy was not so happy.
Here we should show a picture at this moment of Daddy possibly going off the tracks himself here. I don't know. He looks as though he's having fun.
He's having a lot of fun. He was really sort of a bon vivant. And this is my father dancing in the home of a dear friend. And this is with my father's partner of many years, who's quite a famous actress, Kitty Carlisle Hart. And this was the other side. So the 1960s, you know, I had one foot as a hippie living in a teepee, and then the other foot, a father who lived very flamboyantly.
Mixed
Europe.
with the lights of Noel Coward and Irving Berlin, you told me.
Yes, well, Kitty, both of them knew. I mean, it was an extraordinary life growing up. My babysitters, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Arthur Okun, who later was chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. I met Henry Kissinger and George Kennan, these diplomatic figures through my father. From Kitty, which came later, you know, whether it was Rex Harris, I don't want to drop names, but this was very old world aesthetics. And I loved that, and I still do. At the same time, I was taking shape as a child of the 60s. And so those two sides were always sort of boom, boom.
Well, let's move. I want to move back to Germany because we've got a report that I think might interest you, because you put in our questionnaire under dead cool German, as we call it, in other words, a German who's not alive anymore, Helmut James Graf von Moltke. Now, I know who he is because I've done my research, but I think most people will have heard of Stauffenberg.
Sure.
But maybe not him. Tell us a little bit about him.
He was an extraordinary figure, an aristocrat who, together with a group of like-minded Germans, did not think that National Socialism was the honorable way in which Germany in the 30s, 40s ought to be proceeding, on moral grounds. And so he and others who thought as he did really began to imagine a Germany beyond National Socialism.
Let's leave it there, because let's find out more about Graf von Moltke and the so-called Kreisau Circle. Part of history, I have to say, I didn't know about till that report, and also researching Graf von Moltke as your favourite German, or one of them, I should say. You said earlier in the programme that from the age of 12 to 47 you were drunk or stoned. You also said, I know, in another interview, I really became an expert in stupid, which I thought was very... But so how does it feel to be sober?
Oh, it's really a rebirth. You know, it took a long time. Addiction is a horrible thing. It gets those fingers around your throat, and to get them loose is no easy task. I think there are 2 million or thereabouts people here in Germany, for instance, who wrestle with this, and for each of them you have, you know, their children, their parents, their friends, their loved ones. So a lot of people are affected. And when I was younger, you know, you sort of kept putting it off and making excuses and thinking, well, this is fun, misunderstanding the kind of damage that it can do. And
presumably you were working during this time.
I worked
as an actor.
I worked as an actor for many years, and actually I was sort of a victim of, in some respects, my own success, because I had a variety of jobs. I was director of an art gallery in New York, where I met a very dear friend who was on your show not very long ago, a Russian artist, Zhenya Sheff. Whose
artwork is on the front of the book.
Absolutely.
I recognised it. Yes, we had him in recently. Yeah, wonderful.
That's right. So that was a great time and a great adventure, being director of an art gallery. Then I got a job. I was managing editor at Citibank in New York.
What?
And I had a big staff, and they paid me a ridiculous amount of money. And I thought, you know, where's the problem? But of course, at a personal level, and I'm sorry to sort of wash clothes in public, but speaking to that, what happens when you have these sort of habits is you don't really grow up. You know, whenever you're confronted with a problem, you run and hide in what you're drinking or what you're smoking. And so when I finally sort of stepped away from it, knock on wood, at age 47, you know, in one respect, it was having to begin growing up, not hiding from these things.
And was there a specific moment that made you stop?
Yes. Well, I mean, it was cumulative. I wasn't being the father that I wanted to be. My son, Nicholas, was now 26. You know, I was doing my best, but it was not my best. And then I had a wonderful Italian lady in my life at that time, and we were in the south in Italy, and she said to me, "Ciao." That was enough. Actually, she worked at the Italian embassy, and we were at the embassy one night, and the ambassador, who was a wonderful man, said to me, I don't want to do my cheesy Italian accent, but he said to me, "Your father was Ivo Lederer. He was my favorite professor," I think at Yale, Stanford or Yale. "I have his book on my table upstairs," and I had a glass of red wine in one hand, and I started slapping him on the shoulder, saying, "I'm so happy to hear that, you know, you were close to my father," and really acting sort of like a cowboy. And my friend who worked at the embassy came over and said, "Michael, can you please stop hitting the ambassador?" And those sort of moments built up. I mean, I fell off from the fourth story of a building in Spain.
The fourth story?
Fourth story of a building.
You lived to tell the tale.
And I rolled a car down the side of a mountain, and there was just so much of that. And the book Cadaques deals with these sorts of things because you think these are great stories. You know, when you're inside it at the moment, you think this is romantic and this is what poets are supposed to do, or writers, actors are supposed to do.
And now, if I'm right, you haven't drunk or taken anything for 10 years. Yeah. Tell me briefly about the Dubrovnik Shakespeare Festival. I'm intrigued because Shakespeare in Dubrovnik, is it in English or?
Well, this year there's a hiatus, and we're not exactly sure whether next year it's going to be a small festival or more ambitious. And there are reasons for that. One is that having delayed so long the writing, I'm now close to finishing. I've finished the first draft of my next book. That's taken more and more of my time, so I'm giving less.
So it's not happening at the moment, then, the Dubrovnik Festival.
In abbreviated form. We did a little something in London last year, and here in Berlin and in Dubrovnik, but it's not the ambitious scale that it was when it began.
Okay. Marlene Dietrich, I want to mention, because you put her down as your favourite singer, and I've read your book of short stories, and in there, in your short story, Alice Klar, you write about the fact that Berlin women don't wear skirts, comparing them with other European women in capital cities. I mean, I say Marlene Dietrich because she was was she the first androgynous actress?
That I don't know, and that I don't think so. I think even before her, but she's certainly the one who brought the world's attention to that.
But let's talk about Berlin women, or German women, I should say. You said that in your short story. Do you think that's the case, that they?
I think Berlin is distinct from the rest of Germany, and I know it much better. So if you go down south to München, if you go to Stuttgart or Frankfurt, it's a different pace, it's a different aesthetic, and different priorities. I think Berlin, the same thing that is a great plus for it, as much of life, also has its some shortcomings, and it's a very practical place, Berlin, which makes it so comfortable to live here. We can depend, we can rely that this is going to function, and so on and so forth. It's not the most sort of romantic, and it doesn't lean toward excess.
Berlin doesn't lean toward excess?
Well, not. Of course, there except. Okay, you're knowing something that's making you smile.
Well, I just
there.
think compared to the rest, it's not excessive, no. No, anyway, there's a square, and I know you're very fond of Potsdamer Platz, and we'll come to that, because there's a square in Berlin named after Marlene Dietrich, which is part of the new Potsdamer Platz. That's where we're off to right now. It's a place that holds a historic fascination for our guest.
Potsdamer Platz, slap bang in the middle of the city. It's a symbol of the new Berlin. It's where the old east and west of the city meet, but it's also much more than that. It's a major intersection, surrounded by Berlin's most modern skyscrapers. At 103 meters, the Kohlhoff Tower is the tallest building on Potsdamer Platz. The office block has a viewing platform on the 24th floor, which offers some of the finest views over Berlin. Directly opposite are the Sony Center and Deutsche Bahn's glass-fronted high-rise offices. Today's Potsdamer Platz bears little resemblance to its form in the 1920s. Back then, it was the undisputed heart of the city. At what was then Europe's busiest traffic junction, Berlin's first traffic lights introduced order to the mayhem. After the wall was built, a viewing platform allowed Westerners to look across to East Berlin. Potsdamer Platz became a wasteland after its destruction in World War II. It was located in no man's land between East and West. Then came the momentous events of November 1989, when the wall fell. Only a few pieces of the wall remain to remind people of the border that once divided the city. In the mid-1990s, Potsdamer Platz became Europe's biggest building site. Particularly impressive was the relocation on rails of the opulent Kaisersaal, a protected historic remnant of the former Hotel Esplanade. It was in the way of planned new buildings. Today, the room has been integrated into the Sony Center and restored to its former glory. It's hired out for exclusive receptions. Outside is the Sony Center with its massive canopy. The Central Forum is open to visitors night and day and is surrounded by 7 buildings, including Sony's European headquarters.
My guest is the writer Michael Lederer, who spends most of his time in Berlin, although he has a place in Spain and a place in Dubrovnik as well. What's the particular fascination about Potsdamer Platz? Is it the history again?
Yes, I think I spoke to it earlier when I said that Berlin had reinvented itself. And the fact that back in Weimar, Germany, Potsdamer Platz was considered the most modern intersection in Europe. You had the first traffic light in Europe. You had Columbus House, this very modern architecture of its day. Then you have the war, the devastation afterwards, and many of the buildings, even those not destroyed in the war, were destroyed thereafter, and it was a minefield, and it was a no man's land. And when I came to Berlin first, 1998, there were so many building cranes hovering over it, and you could literally see Berlin reconstructing itself. And today, it's not everybody's favorite. It might not be my favorite in some ways, but I think it stands as a symbol of Berlin reborn.
Okay. The coolest living German you put down as Angela Merkel, and then you put in brackets, I can explain. Briefly, tell us, why is she your favourite?
Well, I think I also put my 5-year-old nephew, Lucas. I think it was a tie.
I think you put him down as the wisest German.
Oh, the wisest German.
Yeah.
That was it.
Angela Merkel was the coolest German. Maybe you got those two mixed up, I don't know.
Okay, sorry.
Well, she's pretty wise, isn't she?
She's very wise. She's very wise. I think that in the States, of course, we elected twice now no drama Obama. And there's some comfort, thinking that a leader is not out just to blow whistles and wave balloons, but really get to work. And I think there's something that Europe needs, Germany needs, and the world needs, in the way that she very seriously mindedly, gets to work every day, doing her best, not extreme to one way or the other, and there's just this very comforting. One might not agree, of course, with everything that she does, but we need some little touch of quiet sanity in the context of today.
Okay. You're writing a new book. Is that about Berlin? Tell us about the new book, if you will. Some authors don't like to reveal too much.
No, I'm happy to, because this is my I live inside this, and it's finished now. I'm actually writing a film script based on it. It's called Don Quixote Saving America. And what it is, it's the story of a fellow who, I was just talking about the news, and which is so discomforting these days, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's global warming. We see a lot of things that we don't really want to see. And this is a fellow who takes refuge in watching old television shows from the 50s, in which it looks as though families stay together, everyone says please and thank you, mommies and daddies don't divorce, you know. And his picture of America that he believes was and can be again. And then he sets out in his old car across the States, determined to get it back to that. And of course, it's not as easy as he would like. So there are moments, for instance, he sees a little old lady who has just taken some money from a bancomat. And she's very nervously looking around, and she's about to cross the street. He gets out of his old car and he goes up to her to help her. He says, you poor little thing, let me help you. And as he approaches her, she starts to scream, help, help, police, thief, because she misinterprets. And he says, you know, I don't want to steal your money.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on today.
There's a lot. And so I put in the context of today's very confused world, this man who's trying to live sort of by the straight and narrow, and show that it's not easy to do. And it's my reaction to the news.
Okay. Best thing about living in Germany, I think, might go quite well with this, because I'd like you very quickly, we've only got about half a minute left, safe centre of action like a bullfight. Is that how you feel in Germany?
Yes, absolutely. And again, more so today because of events happening just over our shoulder. Hemingway said once about the bullfight that it's like having a front seat at the war, only you don't have to dodge the bullets. And Berlin, being so close to the events that are going on near us today, does feel something like that, although I'm not sure it's as safe a distance as some of us would like.
So will you stay?
Yes, this is home.
This is home?
This is home.
That's a nice way to finish it. Michael Lederer, thank you. It's been fascinating talking to you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for being with us today, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to write to us, insight@dw.de. We do like to hear from you. Of course, you could be lucky and be the winner of this book, but also you can write to us, give us your opinions of the show, tell us what you thought of what Michael's been saying about Berlin, Germany, and the world in general. Or join us again next week at the same time for another edition of the show. Bye-bye for now.